And I approached Groundwood. First, I approached them with a project that I thought they'd be interested in. And it's kind of an offshoot of a shorter piece that I did called The Roses in My Carpets, which is based on my Afghan refugee foster child. I got a chance to meet him in 1992, and I wrote an award-winning story based on that meeting. And from that book, I used the proceeds to sponsor some orphanages in libraries, in orphanages in Afghanistan. And what happened was, it was one girl's story that just tore my heart out. I read a report on children in crisis. And what had happened to this poor girl was that her mother had died during the war. Her father got remarried. The stepmother didn't want her. So the father takes her to the marketplace and he leaves her there. And she ends up in the orphanage that I'm sponsoring. And I read this girl's story, and the funny thing was, the same scenario was playing out in my extended family. I had a relative dying of breast cancer, and her husband had run off with another woman and leaving the two kids after she died with a deadbeat dad. And I thought, how many kids go through this kind of an abandonment? And I thought, what would that feel like? And I was going down to visit my mom one day, and I heard this voice. And this is the way a lot of my stories come to me. They come as an auditory sound in my right ear. I heard if it's in both ears, it means you're crazy. So it's only in one ear. And I heard this girl's voice, and she just said, I thought she was sleeping. And I thought she's talking about her mother. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've got to write this story. And I was planning to actually write this other story that I've been planning since I was 16 years old, but this one just demanded to be written. And I wrote that story within 5 months. 5 months, that's about the fastest I've ever written a novel. And I sent it to my agent, and she actually debated over it for about 7 months. She kept it for a long time.
These are tough subjects.
Yeah, you know what, and the thing is, most of the stories coming out of Afghanistan, you say, I have a sister-in-law who's Afghan, and I have a son-in-law who's Afghan. And my son-in-law, his family is from Kandahar, and my sister-in-law's family is from Kabul. World of difference, okay? The Kabuli people are very westernized. You've got the kind of people that, the kite runner kind of people, where you can really relate to the stories. They're very westernized. Anti-Taliban. Kandahar is the heart of Taliban territory. And my son-in-law's family is from there. And my son-in-law's mother is an amazing woman, and she wears the niqab. She wears that face cover thing. And all 3 of my daughters started wearing it. You know, they decided they're born here in Canada, they started wearing it. And I wanted to figure out why. And I thought, you know what? All the stories coming out of Afghanistan, they're all from the Kabuli perspective. I think this girl, she's not from Kabul, she's from Kandahar. She's from that area. She's more conservative, because like Kabul's like unlike the rest of the country. The whole country is very conservative. Kabul's more westernized. And I thought, she's from Kandahar, and I think she wants to wear the burqa. And I thought, what would that be like? And this happens to her. You know, and her father, I thought, what kind of father would do this? And that became this novel. And it's called Wanting More, M-O-R. That's the name of her mother. And that novel is coming out with Groundwood. And then in the meantime, Groundwood came up with another project for me. It was funny because the Citizenship Canada had approached them to do an immigrant story about what it feels like coming as an immigrant to Canada. And I know what that feels like. So I had just signed on for this novel, and the editor, she said to me, she said, are you interested in this project? I said, absolutely. And it's called Coming to Canada, and it's going to be given to each immigrant child that comes to Canada. Plus, they're making a trade version that's going to be sold in stores, to schools, and all kinds of places.
What are you telling people who come to Canada?
What I wanted to do, I wanted to showcase Canada. As a kid, my father was really unusual. He's a real pioneer, maverick, you know, traveler. And when I was 13, we drove all the way across Canada up to the Yukon, to Alaska, and we drove back. So I've actually seen how amazing this country is. And I've seen a lot of immigrants, and a lot of them don't seem to be curious about the wonders of this country. And I really wanted to kind of make that a focus of this story. And basically, it was funny because I was at this consultation group meeting. All these consultants, immigrant consultants, were there. And I said, well, you know, I really want to showcase Canada. I really want to show how beautiful it is. And the others were saying, well, not many immigrants would do something like that. And I said, well, we did. And they said, well, you know, don't make it too, you know, upbeat. And I said, what, you want me to make it negative? And I said, and we were having this argument back and forth. And then I thought, okay, you know what? I had to have a boy and girl character anyways. And I thought, what if it's a brother and sister from this family, this little Pakistani family that comes to Canada? And what if the girl's optimistic and the boy's a bit pessimistic? So you kind of get both sides of the equation. And that really worked. And because you get this bouncy little girl who's telling the story, and she's got her older brother who's a little bit on the pessimistic side. So that became Coming to Canada. But the hardest, most brutally part of the project was dealing with the educational consultants, because they wanted to sanitize everything. Oh, I had some amazing lines in there. I had to cut them because they were a little bit too controversial.
But that's the strongest part of your stories, is that.
Well, you know, it's funny. I thought so too. But then when I cut them and I added the other stuff that they had asked for, I have to admit, it did improve the story. And you know, it's the kind of story any teacher can share with their kid and their kids, their students and everything. And there's not going to be anything really that they're going to object to too much.
Mm-hmm. What do you think the situation is now for people coming to Canada? Is it better? Is it worse?
Apparently, it's a lot harder for them to establish themselves. When I was growing up, the immigrant community was quite on the wealthy side, because most of the people being allowed into Canada had a lot of skills. My father was a tool and agate maker, so that was a good skill, or they were very educated. But now they've had a lot of refugees, and a lot of them have had a hard time. And even on welfare, like sometimes they live on welfare and they live in really close communities. I don't really like that. I want them to get out and mingle, get to know people, get people to know them, because I think fear grows when people kind of isolate themselves, which is why I was so alarmed with a lot of the American attitudes where they're going insular. And I was really alarmed by a lot of that.
So I was just wondering if part of what you're doing when you're traveling is sort of presenting Canadians with Muslim culture.
I don't know about that. Like, to me, it's all about story. It's got to have a good story. Like each of my stories, like I have one called Ruler of the Courtyard, and that one's about a girl who's afraid of chickens. And it's a really funny story. Yeah, the girl is Muslim and the culture is Pakistani. Mm-hmm. But to me, culture in a story, it should be like wallpaper. It shouldn't be something that should be the crux of the problem. No, it should be part of the setting. You know, and that's what I try to do with my stories. Yeah, they're set in Muslim culture, but they're stories that really anybody, I would hope, can relate to.
Thanks very much, Rukhsana Khan.
Thank
very nice
you.
talking with you.
My pleasure.
Thanks. Yeah.